A girl from a town of 600 people shatters a lamp with her voice, and 15 years later invents an entire music genre. This is the story of Tarja Turunen, a singer who's a lot more than just one band. Tarja Turunen was born on August 17, 1977, in Puhos, a tiny town near Kati in eastern Finland. Her father was a carpenter, her mother worked in public administration, and she had two brothers. She was the middle child. In one interview, she said music was already a fixture in her house long before she ever sang professionally. Both her parents and her older brother had great voices, she said, but she was the first one to actually turn that into a career. Her younger brother, Timo, ended up going down a similar road. Today he's a pop singer under the name Timo Teo Turunen. The two of them have guested on each other's albums over the years. She started piano lessons at 6, and her teacher happened to be the mother of a local boy named Tuomas Holopainen. Neither family had any idea back then that those lessons would end up crossing two very different musical destinies years later. Piano was just the beginning though, because it quickly became clear the keys weren't really her thing, her voice was. Tarja started training as a lyric soprano early on, first in her hometown, then at a music-focused secondary school. That's where one of her favorite stories comes from, one she still tells with a laugh. She was vocalizing alone in a rehearsal room, messing around with a lamp that buzzed whenever she hit a certain frequency, until, somehow, she made it explode. Her reaction was to bolt down the stairs, screaming with excitement to tell her friends what she just discovered about her own voice. But at school, that voice didn't always work in her favor. Her music teacher said her ear was so sharp that she only needed to hear a note once to sing it back, while other kids needed several tries. Unfortunately, that gap bred jealousy among some classmates who started treating her badly. To get around it, her teacher came up with the idea of organizing projects outside of school hours. That's how, at 15, she landed her first big solo performance, a concert in a church in front of 1,000 people, a massive debut for a teenager from such a small town. At 18, she moved to Kuopio to study at the Sibelius Academy, and later completed part of her training at the Hochschule für Musik in Karlsruhe, Germany, where she finished shaping herself as a classical singer with real operatic technique and a lied repertoire. Over time, her range kept shifting. She started out as a pure lyric soprano, but eventually picked up mezzo-soprano repertoire too, which today lets her hit low notes that are unusual for someone originally trained as a soprano. At that point in her life, her path looked pretty clear. She wanted to sing opera, and metal had nothing to do with it. She admitted years later that at that stage, opera was the only way she knew how to sing. She didn't know how to do anything with her voice except push it to full power, so anything outside that dramatic register was foreign to her. In other words, Tarja didn't end up in metal because she went looking for it as a kid. Life just carried her there without her noticing. Over the years, her training technically defined her as a lyric soprano with a 3.5 octave range. That foundation is what later let her perform at the Presidential Palace of Finland and share a stage with the Romanian National Opera. How many voices that came out of metal can say the same thing? In 1996, back in Kuopio, Tuomas Holopainen, the boy whose mother had given her piano lessons as a kid, asked her to join a music project he was putting together, something acoustic and low-key. She said yes without thinking twice. And during the first test recording, something unexpected happened. Her voice, trained for over a decade for opera, turned out way too big and dramatic for that stripped-down format, so the whole project had to be redesigned around her. That's how what would become Nightwish was born. She was the one who changed the band's direction, because without her classical training, it never would have sounded the way it ended up sounding. What Tarja brought wasn't just a powerful voice, it was a completely new way of singing over a distorted guitar, holding notes in an operatic style, treating every song like it was a piece of lyric repertoire. That shifted the whole metal scene, which quickly started calling itself symphonic metal. Within a few years, dozens of singers across Europe were taking classical voice lessons directly inspired by what she was doing on stage. And that whole wave turned her into the face of the movement. Before she even turned 25, she was landing on the covers of the biggest metal magazines in Norway, Germany, Spain, Brazil, France, Sweden, Belgium, Finland, and Argentina. That technical leap really showed on the band's second album, released in 1998, where Tarja took on a track directly inspired by a classic operatic aria, something she herself called a huge challenge. On another song from that same record, she sang in a register much lower than usual for her, and she said afterward that her own bandmates laughed in the studio watching her struggle to hit those notes. That mix of real vocal demands and metal power is what eventually got dubbed opera metal. Far from a marketing label, it was a pretty literal description of what her voice was doing. By 2000, at just 23, Tarja was already one of the most recognized voices in European heavy rock. That same year, the band kicked off its first South American tour, a trip that would change her life personally as much as professionally. That's where she met Marcelo Cabuli, an Argentine businessman who joined the tour as the band's manager for the region. She said later that there was something between them almost from day one, a connection neither of them was ready to put into words yet. That bond didn't fully lock in until months later, after a violent incident during a show in Guadalajara, when a fan rushed the stage and knocked her to the ground. Marcelo ran up and pulled the guy off her, and that's when things officially started between them. They dated for a little over 2 years before getting married on December 31st, 2002. Marcelo also took on the role of her personal manager, a job he still holds to this day. But Tarja's life wasn't only happening on metal stages. All through the 9 years she spent in the band, she kept singing opera, classical music, and chamber repertoire. She sang with the choir at the Savonlinna Opera Festival performing Wagner and Verdi. She took part as a soloist in a modern ballet production with the Finnish National Opera in late 1999. And starting in 2001, she joined a series of touring concerts across theaters in Chile and Argentina, alongside other Scandinavian singers. For her, that double artistic life was a way to stay connected to the classical training that had shaped her since childhood. Still during her years in the band, she was a voice other artists actively sought out. She guested on the debut album from Argentine bassist Beto Vázquez and also on a single from German singer Martin Kesici, two collaborations that show just how far her name was already traveling outside strictly Finnish circles. By December 2003, Finland's own president, Tarja Halonen, invited her to the country's official Independence Day celebration, the biggest social event in Finland, and that same night publicly dubbed her the Voice of Finland. At 26, she was already a source of national pride. Behind all that success, though, an uncontrollable tension had been building. The relationship between her husband and the rest of the band's management had gotten harder and harder, and it eventually seeped into her own relationship with her bandmates. In December 2004, after a show, she told them herself that she planned to leave the band after one more album and one more tour. That final tour, for the album Once, the biggest of her career up to that point, had kicked off in May 2004 and kept them on the road for a year and a half across Europe and the America. On October 21st, 2005, on the last date of that tour, right after a show in front of 11,500 people at Hartwall Arena in Helsinki, her bandmates handed her a letter the moment the concert ended. The letter accused her of having changed, of becoming someone more interested in money than in music. The next day, that same letter went up on the band's official website. Tarja found out her time with Nightwish was over by reading an open statement posted for the entire internet at the exact same moment as everyone else. What followed were brutal months for her. A massive media scandal erupted in a country where that band was a source of national pride. Tarja gave a press conference in tears the following week and published her own letter responding to the accusations. The pressure got so intense that she needed to get out of Finland for a while and ended up flying urgently to meet Marcelo in Argentina. Years later, in an interview, she said leaving the band left her disappointed and heartbroken, with a feeling like she'd lost everything, including her trust in the world, in people, in humanity in general. And when she was asked how things ended up with her former bandmates, she said the way they let her go proved those people had stopped being her friends long before that night. On the other side, Tuomas Holopainen himself admitted in an interview that it was the hardest decision he ever had to make in his entire career. 9 years of shared work ended with a letter posted on a website. In 2006, a year after the letter, an official, authorized band biography was published in Finland. Once Upon a Nightwish, the official biography, 1996 to 2006, written by Finnish journalist Marko Mape Olila. 380 pages covering the band's entire history, but only a handful of them ended up sparking a legal fight that dragged on for years. In those pages, Olila pointed directly at Marcelo as one of the people responsible for the internal tension that led to Tarja's exit. When the book was translated into English in 2009 and reached a much bigger audience, Marcelo and 3 Brazilian business partners decided to take it to Finnish court. They were seeking close to 100,000 euros for defamation, claiming the book's accusations had caused them financial problems and, in their own words, personal suffering. The case didn't actually go to trial until November 2011, 5 years after the book first came out. On the other side, neither the publisher nor the author backed down. They maintained they had solid sources inside the music industry backing up what they'd written, and even announced plans to call several influential music industry figures as witnesses. That December, the Helsinki District Court handed down its verdict. It threw out the lawsuit entirely. The judges found that the criticism of Marcelo took up only a handful of the book's 380 pages, and that those mentions hadn't demonstrably damaged either his work or his reputation in South America. On top of that, they ruled Olila hadn't acted with any intent to harm him. For Tarja, all of this put something she'd probably rather have left buried right back in the public eye. The idea, already out there, that her husband was to blame for her split from the band that had made her famous. Years later, whenever she was asked about Marcelo in interviews, she always answered the same way. She said that without him, she never could have built a solo career completely from scratch. She describes him as someone who's been in every recording session since 2000, who became her extra set of ears in the studio, and who's even had a hand in writing some lyrics on her most recent albums. Instead of disappearing, Tarja launched her solo career almost immediately. In 2006, she released a Christmas album, and in 2007 came My Winter Storm, her first solo studio record, released in more than 80 countries. It went gold in Hungary, the Czech Republic, and Germany, and platinum in Finland and Russia. That same year, she was nominated for a German Echo Award for Best Newcomer, and for an Emma, Finland's National Music Award. Just 2 years after the split, she was already building an entire career from zero. And in the middle of that professional rebuild, her personal life was also changing in a big way. Her daughter, who had traveled with her on every tour bus since she was a baby, turned 4 right around the time she and Marcelo decided to slow down that nomadic pace so she could start school. Tarja described that as one of the hardest balances to strike between life on stage and life at home. Her daughter Naomi was born in Buenos Aires on August 12, 2012, and the whole family lived there from 2008 until late 2015. Tarja ended up picking up plenty of local habits. She became a huge fan of asado, started going to soccer games with Marcelo and his friends, and grew genuinely fond of San Lorenzo de Almagro. They moved to Spain in 2015 for their daughter's sake. They picked Malaga so she wouldn't have to learn a third language on top of Finnish and Spanish. In 2010, What Lies Beneath came out, her second solo record, and the first one where she's credited as a songwriter on every original track, recorded alongside a live DVD filmed March 30th and 31st, 2012, at the Teatro El Circulo in Rosario. Before that, back in March 2010, she'd already played a memorable show at Buenos Aires' Luna Park, right in the middle of becoming one of the country's most beloved foreign artists. In 2015, she also released her first fully classical album, Ave Maria, on plein air, featuring 11 pieces by composers like Bach and Piazzolla, plus an Ave Maria she wrote herself. A direct return to the training she'd started with 30 years earlier in a small town in Finland. The What Lies Beneath tour kept her on the road for almost 2 years, including a huge date at the Rock in Rio Festival in Lisbon in September 2011. In 2014, she filmed another live DVD, Beauty and the Beat, this time with a full symphony orchestra and choir, and she took on covering both a Dvorak aria and Led Zeppelin's Kashmir, even performing Swanheart live, a song originally recorded for Oceanborn, almost 10 years after she'd left that band. In 2012, Act 1 came out, with 2 CDs and 2 DVDs covering her whole career up to that point, including covers like Whitesnake's Still of the Night and Gary Moore's Over the Hills and Far Away. That same year, when she was asked in an interview whether she'd ever sing with her old band again, her answer was blunt: only if every single person who took part in that letter left their positions. At the time, the singer who'd replaced her had just left the group. In the middle of all this, Tarja also toured Europe as a co-headliner with Alice Cooper in 2009, and that same year recorded a duet with Klaus Meine, the singer from Scorpions, for one of that band's albums. Alongside her solo career, she spent over a decade developing an electronic music project called Outlanders, with producer Torsten Stenzel, with collaborations that even included Yes guitarist Trevor Rabin. In October 2014, she performed at the Belgian Metal Female Voices Fest, a festival built specifically to celebrate the generation of singers her style had inspired, and there she shared the stage with Doro Pesch, one of the pioneers of European heavy metal, to perform one of Tarja's own songs together. Her influence on that generation showed up in other stories too. She said, laughing, that Epica singer Simone Simons bowed to her like she was meeting royalty the first time they crossed paths in person. She also served as a judge for 2 seasons of The Voice of Finland, alongside Hanoi Rock singer Michael Monroe, and in 2016 became the first singer to get her own emoji as part of a series released by the Finnish government to celebrate national identity, sharing the spot with former president and Nobel Peace Prize winner Martti Ahtisaari. In 2013, she released Colors in the Dark, which cracked the top 10 of the charts in 6 different countries, proving her European audience had stayed right where it was. Between 2016 and 2018, she put out 3 releases in just 2 years. First the EP, The Brightest Void, then the album The Shadow Self, and finally Act 2, a second live album recorded during the world tour that supported those records. It's right in the middle of that near non-stop stretch of work, never taking a break from the road, that the physical toll starts piling up. The same toll that's about to hit hard just a few months later. In late 2018, right after wrapping up a grueling US tour, Tarja suffered a sudden vascular episode at home. Marcelo, who was with her at the time, realized something was seriously wrong and rushed her to the hospital. Doctors never fully confirmed the exact cause, though she herself has directly linked it to her buildup of stress. Even so, she checked herself out of the hospital after 3 days, against medical advice, because she had 22 shows booked across Europe. It took her years to decide to talk about that experience publicly, because she felt it was important to raise awareness about this kind of episode, something that, as she pointed out, affects women her age more often. Around that same time, reflecting on what it means to hold up a solo career without a band structure behind you, she said that at the end of the day, she'd always been alone. She works with talented people, she said, and she's lucky to have a good team, but the big decisions and the responsibility of living with them land on her alone, with no one telling her what to do, not even the record label. That scare ended up being, in her own words, the emotional trigger behind In the Raw, released in August 2019, the most personal album of her entire career, featuring other voices from the genre like Christina Scabia, Tommy Karavik, and Björn Strid. In 2020, with touring shut down by the pandemic, she used that forced break to write her first book, Singing in My Blood, a photographic and biographical look back at her entire life in music, put together with friends and colleagues who'd stood by her both on and off stage. When it comes to her fans, she's mentioned that she keeps a painting hanging in her studio that a fan sent her after an orchestral show in Plovdiv, Bulgaria, at an open-air Roman amphitheater. It's a painting of that exact night, capturing her face, her hair, and that historic stage in the background. She admitted that gestures like that are what remind her the music is still worth it, even after a health scare like the one she'd just been through. Beyond the albums and the tours, Tarja has also let people see who she is off stage in various interviews. She said, for instance, that the one song that makes her lose her mind the second she hears it, no matter where she is Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody, just for the way it shifts from start to finish. and she's explained that her connection to classical singing only really started in her teens, not before, because pushing operatic technique too early on a still-growing girl can actually damage the vocal cords. On December 12, 2017, 12 years after that letter, Tarja invited Marco Hietala, her former bandmate, to her Christmas concert, and the two of them sang Ave Maria together on stage, a first public gesture of reconciliation. In March 2024 came an even bigger step. They recorded Left on Mars together and went on tour, billed as Living the Dream Together. That same year, she also joined 17 shows of Within Temptation's European tour as a guest, sharing the stage with Sharon Denadel, another one of the founding voices of symphonic metal. In November 2023, she released Dark Christmas, her third holiday album, a direct follow-up to her previous one. In 2025, she put out Circus Life, a live album recorded in Bucharest in 2020 that hit #1 on the UK independent charts, and that October, she released Score for a Dark Christmas, a compilation of her 2 holiday records. In June 2026 came Frisson Noir, her 10th solo studio album, which she's described as the heaviest record of her career and her full return to her metal side after 7 years away, led by the singles At Sea, I Don't Care, and The Trace Outlives. She's currently out touring behind it, hitting Portugal, Spain, Italy, Austria, Germany, and Switzerland, with dates confirmed through the end of this year. As a solo artist, she sold more than 100,000 records, landing her among the 50 best-selling female solo artists in the world. No small feat for a career that started from zero after a letter that fired her. And because of her, every time a soprano steps onto a metal stage and holds a note like she's standing in an opera house, one name comes to mind: Tarja Turunen.